Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back once again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans, and today I'm discussing what is the key factor, if there is one, behind TNA's recent wave of successes. Now, I have lost count, and I don't know if I can accurately count how many times they've sold out shows. Mainly the shows they have sold out have been the shows that they have had attached to pay-per-views. Now, yes, they sold out shows before, back in the day and whatnot, a few years ago even, and whatnot, here and there. So it's not that they have never sold out a show or whatever. Certainly they also sold out smaller shows and whatnot, but now they're selling out some much bigger shows, and they have sold out a lot of shows in succession. Hard to Kill, Emergence. I'm not listing these in order, I don't think, unfortunately, sorry, but Slammiversary, Victory Road, just a bunch of these shows that they've had have for this year have been sellouts, and that is good. And they haven't really gotten many more TV views, but I think that, like we said before, the TV views really aren't going to happen unless it's live, or unless there's no spoilers. So that's the problem that they have right now with that, but they can't really do too much about that being taped. So yeah, they need to be live, or they at least need to be, perhaps taped on the same day or whatever, at least fortnightly or bi-weekly or whatever you want to call it. Every other week they need to be live, in my opinion, because then at least you get something, some sort of up and down, motion, and you can show that people, hey, a live show would draw more viewers, which it definitely would. But anyway, certainly they've gotten more pay-per-view buys for a fair few of their pay-per-views. I know some people, will clamor on about, Victory Road and Emergence and these other shows and whatnot, that they aren't pay-per-views, but the thing is, they are still available on pay-per-view to be bought on pay-per-view. So they are also sold as pay-per-views. People can still buy them as pay-per-views. Not everyone buys them as quote-unquote a pay-per-view exactly, but it is a pay-per-view. It is able to be ordered as an event on Triller TV and these other apps and whatnot. So it is still a pay-per-view. It is still marketed as a pay-per-view by Triller TV, aka Fight TV, and these other apps and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm not going to get away from saying that they're, pay-per-views or PLEs or whatever else, whatever you want to call them. Yes, they're the cheaper ones. They're only like $10, whereas the Big Four pay-per-views, Hard to Kill, Slammiversary, Bound for Glory, and Rebellion, are a bit more, but still, I think saying, these little pay-per-views or, whatever, are cheap, and these other big ones are, a little bit more expensive, that's pretty good. I think maybe even just like saying, like, the big two pay-per-views, they're a little bit more, and, the other two pay-per-views are a little bit less or whatever, but they're still a bit more than the other two pay-per-views or whatever, or other regular pay-per-views that are every month, effectively, would be good. But I don't know, that's just me, because then you could get more people buying those, but then again, it's like, well, you want more people to buy the big shows, but it's like, well, we want people to pay big money for those big shows, so, but yeah, a lot of the, B pay-per-views or C pay-per-views or F pay-per-views or whatever you want to call them are, the monthly pay-per-views or just regular pay-per-views are more to set up the big pay-per-views. So, but anyway, what is the key thing that is, behind their recent success? And I don't think you can nail it down to one thing or another thing. I don't know how much percentage each part sort of falls into, but I think there's 5 or 6 key categories that kind of, you know, um, you know, give us an insight as to why TNA has in the last year really gotten a lot of success. Obviously, the one of the big ones that a lot of people point to is the working relationship with WWE and in NXT, and TNA talent being on NXT and NXT talent being on TNA. I don't know how many people are actually going to tune in to TNA just by seeing that TNA talent exists, because they've already known that TNA talent exists. Maybe perhaps they haven't really seen what these talent can do. They've heard of them or whatever and that sort of thing, but they haven't really seen them do promos, wrestle and do the whole professional wrestling thing of tell stories, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Perhaps that's the thing, to some extent. Like, yeah, we've heard of these guys or kind of or whatever. It's like the indies. Like, I might have heard of some of these guys, but haven't really seen them, so I can't really put too much stock in them and don't really follow them much. Like, I don't follow people when they're going into New Japan and those sort of shows. But it's one of those things of saying, oh, well, I've heard of this person, maybe now I've seen them or whatever, and when they turn up, perhaps I'll watch them, if I'm a big fan or whatever. But that's obviously a big one that people, sort of point to and say, hey, that's a reason, because they're working with WWE, and people do sort of go, oh, well, maybe we'll check out what TNA is doing, and we've seen these, wrestlers that are coming from TNA and whatnot, these big stars and whatnot, and we might get to see some NXT stars. I don't know how much that is, because again, thus far, WWE has not really sent very many quote-unquote big names, but on the NXT roster, there aren't that many quote-unquote big names. That is their more quote-unquote developmental sort of area or whatnot. So a lot of those kids, I don't want to call them kids, but those young wrestlers, mostly younger wrestlers, are, still trying to establish themselves and still trying to get, their foot in the door in the business. And I think that WWE perhaps picked up a lot of those talent too quickly and should have let them stay on the indies and marinate for a few years and work their way around and do some stuff and whatnot. I think that some people's perspective of there aren't territories anymore, there's just indies. Well, you can just go to any indie and then go to another indie and then go to another indie. Like, you can go to all these indies if you really want to. So that's just the same as having the territories, in a sense. Like, not exactly the same, but again, in some ways similar. You can still go around the country, around the world, and ply your trade and learn different things in different areas and whatnot. So I don't really think that there's any real big, huge difference between that. It's just not, a system where everyone's sort of going, oh, well, we'll trade you this person for that person or whatever and whatnot, that sort of thing. But still, not the main point, but still, I think some of the consistency that TNA has had for the last 6 or 7 years, they have been consistently good, not great, perhaps in at all times, but no one bats 1,000. They've been consistently good for at least a few years. They've had consistently good wrestling, consistently good storytelling, and everything's been consistently at least good to great, if not, really, really great. And there's been a few things that have been a little bit like, I don't know about this, boss, or whatever, but, for the most part, there haven't been those moments where you just, go, there's been a few moments where people have said, oh, the old TNA's back again and doing their shenanigans and whatnot. especially when they fired Scott D'Amore and all that and whatnot, it didn't seem like there was much reason behind it and that sort of thing. But that really wasn't due to TNA. That was due to the owners of the Anthem product and whatnot and all that. So, but again, I get what they're saying. But again, that's not really them being like, oh, we're back to our old ways. Like this was just something that happened and it's a bit unfortunate or whatever. But again, like for the most part, they have been doing, good business. They've been, trying to mend fences with people around the world. They got a lot of moments and a lot of people that people were like, oh, they'll never get, Okada to wrestle over there. And then Okada went and wrestled there, like after I think it was like 10 years or something, and maybe even more of, bashing TNA and all of this. But, then he went back. I think he only had one match or one set of appearances or whatever it was. But hey, they mended fences with him and whatnot. So that is good. Like I certainly agree with Okada and some of what he said, but it's not the same regime as it was back when he was there, and it's just not, the company's fault. It's the people who are running the company's fault, the bookers and the people that are actually in the, office or whatever, or in the booking meetings or whatever. Their fault. You should be blaming Hogan, Bischoff, whoever was actually in charge of creative or whatever at the time, or in charge of, the promotion at the time. You shouldn't be blaming TNA itself. It's just a show, effectively. It's a wrestling show, so it just exists. It's not an entity that you can blame, but you're just like using that as a, blanket term, for the office or whatever. Another thing, like no scandals. No, well, maybe one or two, but like not many. And like that's a big thing. Just like no real big scandals, no big, fights and hubbub and all this stuff and whatnot. And all of that stuff. It's not, where it's like, man, like this is happening every week or every few weeks or whatever it is, and there's something else and something else and something else and all of that sort of stuff. No, it's pretty, quiet. Austin Aries a few years ago, that was about it. Like stuff with Scott D'Amore you could perhaps point to, I don't know, but like again, that wasn't really controversial or whatever and whatnot. That wasn't a big fight between people or whatnot. And even Austin Aries, it wasn't a big fight. He just, and I think even, it's come out since saying that it was semi-planned or whatever else, but it was just a really bad look in a lot of ways and whatnot, or he thought it was approved or whatever. I don't know. I haven't really dived deep enough into that. Perhaps I need to dive a bit deeper into the rabbit hole there, but I don't know. I might one day at some point. I don't know, but I'm more interested in the here and now and the future anyway. At this juncture, I don't really want to stir up old crap. That's the problem too. It seems like everyone else wants to just stir up the same old crap. But yeah, I want to actually get on here and actually say, hey, no, right now and for the last few years, mostly they've been pretty darn good and pretty darn consistent. And have done the right thing by everyone that's been in there and done something, and they've showcased whatever they can do, and that's the thing. Like they've built their roster again. Another thing, everyone's been there for six or so years at least at this point, and everyone is starting to feel like they're moving on up and moving on out and going somewhere. Josh Alexander, faster turnaround than some. Moose, he didn't really feel like that big of a main eventer for quite a while. Like, he was there and he was doing stuff and he was, a guy that a lot of people were talking about, and he was a decent wrestler and whatnot, and he was a decent talker, but he really didn't become one of the top guys for quite a while but in the last like few years, he's won two or three world championships. So you know that's great, and I think that those are the two main faces right now of TNA. Like, you could talk about the next face coming up, and I've been skirting around it a lot, but Joe Hendry, the biggest star right now in their company, without doubt. you know as far as like crowd reactions, as far as you know casual audience awareness and investment and all of that sort of stuff. So that's been another one. Like Nick Nemeth, I think also sort of kind of on that sort of somewhere. And yeah, on that note of Nick Nemeth as well, it's like there's not no WWE guys, but there's not too many ex WWE guys, though there is now a few WWE talent coming over with the NXT crossover. It's a lot different to having a full roster of ex WWE talent. It feels a lot like a lot of the younger wrestlers that are there in TNA actually are on par with a lot of the ex WWE talent that are there. The Hardys, they're filling a decent role in the tag team division. And, a lot of tag teams, where even if in loss, if they look good against the Hardys, that is good in some way, in some fashion, because they're getting to share the ring and perhaps even getting wins and whatnot experience against these legendary wrestlers. We just talked about Nick Nemeth in the world title picture. Uh, you could say like Brian Myers, but Brian Myers has sort of been part of the furniture for a while. But you can obviously talk about Matt Cardona, though he's been in and out, and he probably will leave again and come back again at some point as well. But yeah, there's been a lot of ex WWE talent come through the doors, and that's been more of a revolving door sort of effect rather than. And some people might say that, well, that's bad, that they were just like, no one stays, or no one's, whatever, here for any real period of time or whatnot. But the thing is, it's like, well, it means that these guys don't get too overexposed. They have their little run and then they go away, which is, somewhat good. I think like Trinity, her run was really good. We're gonna see Zia Zhao. What's her Li Zing Li or something, whatever her new name is. Sorry, I'm not too caught up with that right now, but I will eventually nail it down and remember what her new name is. It takes a long time for people to remember new names and whatnot, and I still think people call them by their WWE name a lot of the time. Like, people still talk about who the heck are you talking about when I say Nick Nemeth? That's Dolph Ziggler, bro. You know, so I've gotten used to that now, and whatnot. But again, it's not like there's just like the whole roster is effectively all these ex WWE guys and maybe a couple of indie guys or whatever, a few younger talent that really haven't got much chance or much exposure or whatever. No, everyone that's there, that's younger talent or up and coming talent, is always getting exposure and getting those opportunities to work with some of these people from WWE, or even just like major TNA talent, like again from the past, like Eric Young and guys like that. Rhino, I know, sort of kind of floating around and whatnot, still like he's more doing jobs than anyone else for the most part right now. But again, he's still there sometimes and still doing that and still helping put a lot of these young guys over, and that's really good. Like, that's what you need. You need these guys that are there that have had name value in the past, to help these young guys build themselves up and and really feel like, man, these guys are going somewhere and they're going to be a big deal and whatnot, and we should pay attention to them. Um, you know, the I don't want to say failure, but the what would you call it? The decline, I guess, of AEW of late. They've had some good shows and whatnot here and there. Certainly, they had their Wembley Stadium. They had a big sellout there in Wembley and whatnot. Um, but there's been a lot of negativity around AEW of late in the last couple of years and whatnot. So people, and I think it's again like there's literally no other wrestling company beyond WWE and AEW and TNA that actually has a proper weekly 52 weeks out of the year TV show. So again, it's like, well, what's my other option? I don't want to watch AEW because everything in I've been watching that for the last couple of years, and then every single time I'm complaining about, like, and that's what I mean, like, if you're always complaining about it and there's never anything good for you to actually feel like, man, they actually did a good job with that, or at least 50%, whatever it is, where it's like, oh yeah, half the show's good, or at least more than half the show's good, and makes sense, and whatever else. And there's like, I know that they've got great wrestling and they do great stuff. No one bats 1,000. I always say that. But the thing is, there has been a lot of negativity. And yes, perhaps, like TNA isn't perfect, like we say, but again, it's just one of those things that people go, well, maybe we'll try and see what TNA has to offer, because again, like, maybe they don't want to tune into WWE or whatever it is, who knows. They're more of a fan of like more serious, like, wrestling or whatever and whatnot. They don't want to just see, or maybe they'll tune into Ring of Honor, even though that's really AEW Ring of Honor or whatever. But still, it's one of those things where they don't, like, they want stories, but they want clear stories, and they want stories that actually have, like, a lot more to them or whatever it is. And TNA has that. TNA has those promos. TNA has those moments. TNA has stories while also having, decently good wrestling every single week, and very good wrestling sometimes as well. And certainly, like, we just talked about Speedball Bailey and Zachary Wentz just having a 4.5, 4.7, whatever star match it was by Meltzer. I think, you could have just said it was 5 stars, Meltzer, and given it to him. You know, but whatever. Yeah, but like, mostly those would be the reasons I would think of mostly. So I guess in summary of some sort, I think the decline in AEW certainly is a factor. The working relationship with WWE NXT is a factor. The consistency that TNA has had for the last few years has been a factor. Just the meteoric rise of Joe Hendry has been a factor. I think another factor is not too many ex WWE guys, just enough to sort of get fans to be interested and want to check it out, but not too many to sort of dilute or sort of hold down the younger talent. Enough younger talent have sort of gotten over and really developed in that roster and really have become, sort of household names, or somewhat household names, like Joe Hendry, like Moose, like Josh Alexander, those sorts of guys. Jordan Grace, etc. TNA has always done great work with whoever they've gotten hold of for the most part. They had a great run when they did stuff with Trinity. Again, same thing. I'm sure Zaya Zhao or whatever, Zia Lee's going to have a good run there. Dana Brooke, she's had a really good run thus far in TNA. So again, like, there's all these little pieces. Just the amount of work that they've done to repair relationships, gain the fans' trust and just keep putting on a consistently good product every single time that they go out there. Sometimes some things steal the show more so than other things, like Speedball Bailey and Will Ospreay absolutely stole the show and whatnot at Bound for Glory there a couple of years ago. But still, like, there have been those moments and those things that have really, you know, put TNA back onto people's radar and things like that. You know, like sometimes promos and moments and things like that get that out there. Sometimes some of these crossover moments get that back out there. I think now the focus isn't as much on TNA, or it hasn't really been for quite a while, and that has been unfortunate, but it has been like, well, I haven't really heard anything bad about it. So it's like, well, you know, that sounds good, you know, to a lot of people, because they're sort of sick of the drama. They're sick of, you know, the promises not being fulfilled, and when those promises do come to some sort of fruition, you know, that it's like very much like, well, you know, this person has a good debut and then they just sort of peter off and disappear, or whatever, and things like that, or somebody gets hot and then it's not really capitalized on, and it's not really anything that, you know, sometimes that has happened in TNA too, but it hasn't happened to the degree that I feel like it's sort of happened. Like, even in WWE a few years ago, a lot of people were over there doing great stuff and whatnot. I'm not just hating on AEW or whatever here. I'm saying the same thing to WWE. Like, there've been like people that have gotten over there, or people who had potential. I didn't even realize Danny Luna was in like WWE a few years back or whatever it was, and whatnot. So that was crazy to me. But again, just like picking up that young talent, that young lady there, who obviously is very talented and, you know, fit right in with their division, I think. And that's another thing of just saying, well, we're going to go out of our way to find the young talent that we can, that does want to come here, and we're going to, you know, keep those olive branches and whatnot open. They've never had, in the last 6 years or whatever it's been, or 7 years or whatever it's been, you know, negative sort of things, or negative, not like negative relationships, I guess, or not like what Tony Khan has kind of done, and gone out there and said shit about WWE. They don't do that. They just sort of go about their business and try to do the best with the wrestlers and with the product and whatever that they can. Yes, sometimes, you know, it could be better and we wish it was better and whatnot, that sort of thing. But again, it's not our product, and it's not, you know, we don't know how to run a wrestling promotion, you know, and it's very hard to run a wrestling promotion every single day of the week, you know, every week of the year, you know. So if they have more hits than they have misses, then I think that that's, you know, successful. And I do hope for the best, in as we go along in the future, and that's what we've got to keep doing. That's what I feel like I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to push forward and say, you know, again, back when that video came out a few months ago, give TNA a chance or whatever, give TNA a friggin' TV deal, you know, give it some streaming options or whatever, on Netflix, on this, on that, whatever. I don't care. Just give it a friggin' chance, because again, like, you give them a couple of months or a month or so worth of your time won't be wasted. You can sit there and invest in whatever story you want, and there will be some sort of payoff for it. You know, I do feel like the relationship with WWE, sometimes I feel like WWE is just pulling us along there a little bit, and it feels like, well, WWE, what are you doing? You know, like, come on. You know, either just say, okay, we're not really interested in giving you guys anything. We just want the contracts of the young talent, or some of the talent that are here, or whatever else it is, particularly Joe Hendry or whatever, because he's gotten really hot or whatever, or some of the other wrestlers that are here. Or just to use it as a developmental territory. We're just going to send our young guys there because we haven't got enough time, and perhaps we shouldn't have signed them or whatever and whatnot, because they were too young and not really developed enough to the point at which, they could get on, you know, our screens and to the more broad audience and whatnot. And it takes a while to do that. It takes a long time to really get acclimated with being able to understand how to connect with that audience in real life that's in the arena, and connect with that audience that is on TV as well, because the TV audience has a really big disconnect, and that's not your biggest audience, but that's the same thing for pay-per-views, and whatnot. So you've got to be able to connect with the audience that's right there, sort of in front of you, or even in the cheap seats. And then the same thing again with trying to connect with people on TV or on pay-per-view, when you're a young wrestler and learning this, how to do this and how to, because you can be a great wrestler all you want, like, and know every hold and know every move. But if you can't be connecting to the fans that are out there, if you can't be real and you can't find that connection or can't have people connect to you in some way, then they won't care about what happens to you, no matter what it is. Like, so, when people say, oh, I feel, this and that about certain wrestlers, like they lose all the time, I can't invest in them, you know, that's also because their character doesn't really change. That the losses really don't affect them, because it seems like that's their role. This is their role, to be a jobber effectively, you know. So why would I, invest my time and my energy into somebody that doesn't care? If somebody seems to care even just a little bit, then I can see, okay, this has affected them. They are getting angry. They're getting pissed. Whatever else it is, they are getting sad. They are actually going crazy. Whatever it is, it is. That's what you want to see. You want to see whatever it is that they've got to show you, because again, without that connection, you've lost everything. But again, you can't just have story without payoff, and you can't have this combat sport without fighting, without wrestling at the end of the day. And you need to set these things up, these matches and whatnot, with other matches, because that's how wrestling's worked for literal centuries and whatnot, and will continue to work for literal centuries, if not millennia and whatnot. It's still going to be somewhat of a basic formula. Some wrestlers might be more in that gray scale of, are they babyface now? Are they heel now? I feel like Steve Macklin's kind of fell into that space. Is he really a babyface? I don't know. Is he a heel? What's going on with this? Has Josh Alexander really turned back babyface? I kind of felt like he was such a great heel, and again, I think the best heels are actually the ones that draw the money and whatnot. So I feel like if he was a really great heel, that it'd be, again, a great draw, and you could extend that out, for years to come. So just ending it so quickly just feels a little I do hope again that they've got at least something. I do honestly care what it is, but again, it's like, well, if at least it's something, then hey, we got something. That's what I want. I kind of like noticed this the other day, that somebody's posted a picture of the Team Canada logo on the post where he was talking to Sinner and Satan. And then I just looked it up and I was like, oh, both of these guys are actually Canadian. And I had no clue that those guys were Canadian. And I was like, oh, I hope they put the band back together, Team Canada and whatnot. So I kind of want to see that, but I don't know whether that's going to happen and when that's going to happen and how that's going to happen. But again, maybe something like that is fine. I think, like, do something like that. Have him be a mentor to young wrestlers. especially Canadian wrestlers, form something, Team Canada or something like that, the Canadian Alliance or the Toronto Alliance, whatever you want to call it, anything like that, that's fine. But again, you know, make this a thing. It doesn't have to be a heel thing. People always think these teams need to be heels, or these factions or whatever need to be heels, but they can be baby faces, and that sort of thing. So that could do something, or it could be, again, something that's in there. It's like, is this a really heel team? Isn't it? Is it? What is it? And that sort of level of intrigue. But again, that is more for the future and whatnot. But anyway, those are the key factors, I think, that have sort of led to the recent successes that have happened throughout this year. And I think, again, maybe another one that perhaps I haven't really thought of is the rebranding, just the branding back to TNA, because again, like, not many people really knew what Impact Wrestling was, or sort of didn't really understand what the difference was or whatnot. But everyone knew what TNA was, TNA Wrestling. Everyone knew what that was. That was a very strong brand, and it's still almost everyone and their dog was still calling, who knew what Impact was calling it TNA for the most part. But now everyone's just calling it TNA stroke Impact and whatnot. I think if you're going to call it TNA Impact, that's talking about the TV show, the weekly TV show Impact. You shouldn't really refer to it as TNA Impact. You should just refer to it, in my opinion, as TNA, because that's what it is. But again, that's my thought. And I do think that is an important thought, because again, it's like, well, people know what TNA is. They knew what TNA was, even if they're thinking of that in rose-tinted glasses. They knew what that was. On a Thursday night, whatever, Spike TV era, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle, all those guys, whatnot. I'm not going to go through every single name. We'll be here forever. But you know what I mean? Just that identity of, like, this thing, what it was, the glory days, so to speak, and they are hoping for a new era of glory, and perhaps that will come, but we've got to keep working for it, and we've got to keep demanding better and demanding more and demanding for opportunities and chances and these networks and whatnot to give the promotion a freaking break and give it a chance to see what it can actually do on a real network or with real distribution. So, but yeah, guys, I hope for the best, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys, if you have joined this one, that you will join me again in another one.